All right, welcome to America This Week Live on Monday. I'm Matt Taibbi.
And I'm Walter
Oh,
Kern.
wait a second. Are we live? Can everybody hear us? I think we are live.
Okay.
Hang on. Sorry, folks. Emily, are we on? Okay, we're on. Good. All right. So, Walter, how are you doing? I had an eventful day. But
Let's hear about those events.
well, it was one event. Your fearless host had a colonoscopy today, and I was awarded intestine of the week by the doctor. So I'm feeling.
Does that mean there was a lot of stuff in there that was interesting to physicians, or that you had nothing interesting?
Nothing interesting. Not on the contrary, it's the exact opposite kind of commendation there. So I'm feeling pretty stoked at the moment. But how about you? How was your weekend?
Everything was pretty good. If people can't hear me very well, I'm going to switch mics in a minute while Matt holds the floor because mine has not. My advanced mic has not functioned.
You sound great. So,
I do. Oh,
yeah.
Okay. Well, then fine. I'll tell you about my weekend. In Livingston, Montana, the 4th of July is an extended holiday that begins on the 2nd with a parade. So what's it now? The 7th? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So basically it's been the weekend in Livingston for 5 days. Okay. And that means rodeo cowboys, the people who love rodeo cowboys, especially the women, and all sorts of folks have been in town, international travelers, a lot of Germans, with their particular affection for the Wild West. And so I've just been waiting among the crowds and the orgiasts, and it's sort of been, like Mardi Gras. And I don't drink, but I do have the sense to step over pools of vomit, and there have been quite a few. And it was just a really rousing 4th of July. I don't know why. Maybe it's the distance we're getting from COVID and the sort of subdued atmosphere of that. People really came out and got loud and crazy and had a good time.
Got their independence on, right? Got a little party going.
Well, at the rodeo they play that "We'll Put a Boot Up Your Ass" song by Toby Keith. You know that song?
Yeah.
We'll put a boot up your ass. It's the American way, or whatever. And they play all the Lean Greenwood classics and so on. And there was a special, maybe it was the Trump movement that has brought a special, swagger to those militaristic songs. I don't know, but it was a lot of fun. The weather's been great, and I'm happy. I'm happy to be on the other side of it, though. It's like I say, it's a lot like the New Year's, Christmas week is for others, except it's hot and there's a lot of throw up, as
right.
My son calls vomit.
Well, still at that age? Yeah.
He used to call it number 3. He said, "Dad, if number 1 is peeing and number 2 is pooping, what's number 3?" And I said, "There isn't a number 3." He said, "It's throw up, isn't it?"
Well, look, it's one of the great constants of life, especially if you have alcohol in your life. Although neither of us really do at this stage.
No, and thus colon of the week. Was
intestine of the week? Yeah,
intestine of the week.
Yeah.
What I want to know is, are you still in the afterglow of the anesthesia that causes you to be a truth-telling kind of, funny guy?
No, I'm in the post-propofol stage right now, so okay. I'm already fully awake. Okay. But by the way, if anybody can hear some noise, we're going to get that taken care of in a second. That's from right outside my house. But okay, a lot happened over this weekend. We got to give the Trump administration some shit about this Epstein thing. It's embarrassing, don't you think? Well, let's start with what happened.
you're going to get a lot of interesting commentary on me on the Epstein business, because I probably followed it louder, longer, and harder than almost any human being alive. So,
okay, well, please feel free to take it away from me.
Well, let's set the stage first.
Okay, so let's look at SOT 2 first, this is Pam Bondi talking not that long ago about there being tens of thousands of videos showing Jeffrey Epstein and porn with children.
Mm-hmm.
James Plummer said yesterday that all the Epstein files are missing. Can you confirm that? They still haven't heard from you.
No, the FBI, they're reviewing, there are tens of thousands of videos of Epstein with children or child porn. And there are hundreds of victims. And no one victim will ever get released. It's just the volume, and that's what they're going through right now. The FBI is diligently going through that. I haven't seen that statement.
James Plummer said...
Okay, and sorry, go ahead. Did you want to say something?
No.
All right, and then let's look at SOT 1. There's actually two things here, but let's look at the video first. And this is Pam Bondi talking a while ago, and I think she even mentions the word client list in this video.
DOJ may be releasing the list of Jeffrey Epstein's clients. Will that really happen?
It's sitting on my desk right now to review. That's been a directive by President Trump. I'm reviewing that. I'm reviewing JFK files, MLK files. That's all in the process of being reviewed, because that was done at the directive of the president from all of these agencies.
So have you seen anything that you said, oh my gosh?
Not yet.
DOJ may be releasing.
Okay, so, and then the other thing from SOT 1 there is the image of the press release from the DOJ, and it talks about how, as part of our commitment to transparency, the DOJ and the FBI have conducted an exhaustive review of investigative holdings relating to Jeffrey Epstein. And then it's just blah, blah, blah. And the key line is at the bottom. The systematic review revealed no incriminating client list. There was also no credible evidence found from that Epstein blackmailed prominent individuals as part of his actions. We did not uncover evidence that could predicate an investigation against uncharged third parties. Look, I'm not a Jeffrey Epstein expert. I didn't spend a ton of time on this issue, but at minimum, this is a big political problem, I think, for the Trump administration, because not only did their own people talk it up, the release of these files, but, kind of one of the central planks of the Trumpian platform was transparency and opening up files, and we're going to get to the bottom of this and that. And this looks very bad. I mean, it looks... I don't think there's anybody who really believes there isn't a Jeffrey Epstein client list, or that there isn't incredibly incriminating stuff that is yet to be released. So what's your take on this, Walter?
Is it World War III yet? Remember 2 weeks
well,
ago?
That's right. Yes. That was the last week's issue. Right. Yeah.
Has the world economy crashed yet?
No.
But what it was going to, tariffs were going to destroy the post-war order. Remember?
Well, we still have the deadline is 2 days from now on that. So
right.
Mm-hmm.
So has Walter yet suffered for being a little bit calmer and more wait and see than others on some of these, absolutely catastrophic disclosures? No, not so far. Profited? Yes. And so I'm going to profit this time again. And, people saying, wait, let's see Walter excuse Trump for this. I'm not going to excuse anyone for it. I'll say this. Number one, what was Jeffrey Epstein, if he were blackmailing people, blackmailing them for?
Sex.
No. But you blackmail people in order to control them for a reason, right?
Yeah.
For money? Do you think this was a money-making operation?
No, of course not. No.
It was a control operation, if it was a blackmail situation, correct? Controlling them to do what?
Right. to get them to behave a certain way once they're in office,
but they
or
weren't
once they have
often.
political power.
Well, but there were everybody from MIT to Harvard scientists to authors to movie stars to perhaps journalists, politicians, and so on. What was this? Was it just a wholesale blackmail operation that you got anybody who was going into power run through in order to control them? Or were there crimes that they were being leveraged into participating in, turning a deaf ear to or a blind eye to? In other words, what was the Jeffrey Epstein operation for? What was the blackmail for? We are awaiting some like giant eyes wide shut sex crime prosecution, but there are other prosecutions that might include witnesses that were part of this operation, witnesses whose I don't know, cooperation might be assured by maintaining leverage over them. I don't know. All I'm saying is that we don't know the downside of, dude, this happened one day ago. Okay.
Right.
This happened one day ago from a single Axios story that has been confirmed. How this plays into the larger picture and what the larger picture is, I don't know. And until I know, I can't interpret it. And I don't know that anybody who's making it World War III can interpret it either. It's rather strange. Doesn't it seem self-destructive on Trump's part to, on the heels of the big, beautiful bill, suddenly back down on this? Could it be that the DOJ and the FBI are not yet fully under his control? Could be. I don't know. But all I'm saying is, when I see something that's declared to be the final outrage, I pull back and go, but it's part of a story too. And I don't know what story this is a part of. Is this a story of the America Party making its move and Elon Musk and the tech bros, having some information that they've been holding over, I don't know, Trump? And they have decided, after having threatened him, called him a pedophile and so on, to go to war? Is this a war between Trump and somebody else? Is it, as I say, is it part of the prosecution of a larger crime? Let's say, just for example, that you found out that a lot of these people were being blackmailed in order to gain their cooperation in, let's say, a worldwide pandemic.
Okay.
Would you want them prosecuted for statutory rape instead?
No.
In other words, if you've got the biggest list in the world, say it exists, of people who you can push around in various ways, leverage, get to sing, and they are implicated in some other crime of even greater public interest, then why do you want to blow them on statutory rape?
Yeah, but none of that really matters, Walter. I'm just looking at
why does it not matter?
Because the optics of this, look, you already have people like Tom Fitton, what's his name, Bannon, Alex Jones. They're all going absolutely bananas in the sort of right-wing media landscape about how, this can only mean that Trump is sold out, and the particular implication is that.
But all I'm telling you is this can mean many things. I just demonstrated one of the possibilities of what it means. That Trump, dude, we just went through World War III. He had half these same people telling him that he was a tool of Israel who had, was about to start World War III on their behalf, right? I mean, Alex Jones everyone from Alex Jones to Tucker Carlson to Candace Owen to this guy Ian Carroll to all these other characters have been peeling away from Trump for a while now. The dissension in the ranks of the right-wing influencer community it may be coming to a head, and this may give them a kind of headline issue, but it's been happening. And
no, I know, but I still think it's a very bad look for the administration. Like and this goes back to the first weeks of the administration, where we were hearing from all sorts of people about all sorts of things that were imminently about to be released, right? Like I was assured in no uncertain terms that there was a tranche of never released church committee files that was about to come out, and that never happened, right? And this Epstein thing, the Trump administration themselves, they talked about it. Oh, it's on my desk. We're just going through it right now. And, on the heels of the kind of failure to disentangle ourselves from the Gaza situation, from then the following the Israeli attack into Iran. Not that I think that was a bad idea, the bombing itself. I just don't think going in after Israel was a great idea. The one of the main threads with the Epstein story, as far as I understand, is the kind of quasi-established nature of his ties to Mossad. He had
where were they established?
Maxwell.
Where were they established?
Well, he had a girlfriend who talked about him boasting that he was in the Mossad. Then Robert Maxwell, Ghislaine Maxwell's father, had all sorts of reported ties to Israel. And there was another report, I can't remember where it was from, but it was a quoted American official talking about Epstein being handled by the service of a foreign government. This was right around the time of his arrest. I don't know. I think it looks bad.
I'm not saying it doesn't look bad. It looks awful. It looks terrible. It looks terrible. But if my job was just to tell you how things looked, then all I need to do is, repeat what I see on social media. If my job is to tell you what things might be, then I have to think around the edges of events and use my past experience with headlines of astonishing, impact to create maybe a model that isn't everyone else's. I'm merely suggesting that the part this plays in some larger situation that we might not be aware of, or whose outlines we aren't aware of, or which might be just beginning. Let me give you a few stirring facts. This happened right after the passage of this bill. This happened at the height of Trump's power and prestige in terms of passing legislation. And whether people agree with it or not, the Israel thing has been not World War III, and the Iran strike has not led to destruction of the kind that people predicted. So it either came out from his enemies, or he decided this is the time they clearly
decided this was the right time to do it.
This is the time when I'm going to disappoint everybody. This is the time when I feel like I can afford to take the flack that will come from completely taking.
Remember the Christmas Eve announcement about the pardons of the Iran-Contra defendants by George H.W. Bush? Everybody's already wrapping their presents. No one will notice, right?
It's my abiding belief, and people can make fun of it, that if you're sitting where the administration is sitting, you can see down the road further than people on X can. And if you can see down the road, then what might be happening or might be coming that could dwarf even this.
Yeah.
And the dude, has anyone been right about one immediate read on the political situation in years, from Russiagate to right on now? Has anyone been right about any of it? Have any of the instinctive, reflexive reactions played out? I mean, we were talking a couple of months ago about how toward it was to give Elon Musk so much power. Well, it turns out Elon Musk isn't the loyalist and everyone thought he was, right?
Well, I mean, okay, that's a good segue. Let's go to Musk and have some fun on that topic a little bit, because I think you and I were both sort of off camera, sort of texting about what this reminded us of. But Elon over the weekend, as the kind of cherry on the top of the Trump-Musk dissension Sunday, Elon announced the creation of a new party. Can we look at let's look at SOT 4 here.
Tonight, on the heels of President Trump signing his massive domestic policy bill into law, his former close ally, Elon Musk, announcing the formation of a new political party. Musk, the world's richest person, taking to his social media site X to say, "We live in a one-party system, not a democracy. Today, the America Party is formed to give you back your freedom." Musk, who is President Trump's top campaign donor, has been feuding with the president over the so-called One Big Beautiful Bill, which the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office says will add more than $3 trillion to the national debt over the next 10 years. Musk has referred to the legislation as a debt slavery bill and had been teasing a new political party for days. The Tesla CEO did not respond to questions from NBC News seeking clarity about today's announcement.
The stock market's at an all-time high.
For his part, President Trump has been celebrating the bill. The legislation extends the tax cuts from his first term, reduces tax.
We can stop there. Okay.
Here's my case in point for our trolls. Did anyone predict 2 months ago, during the Doge takeover of the U.S. government, that there would be an Elon Musk third party which would be pledged to root out Trump loyalists in Congress? Did anyone predict that? So why do we think we can predict anything now?
Well, no, I mean, I'm not saying anything about this except that it's funny.
Well, but all I'm saying is, and I'm just framing this because I watched the comments go up. Dude, you people, listen. You are straight line, linear thinkers who take every fucking grenade that drops, think it's the beginning of World War III, every alliance, and thinks it's the beginning of the Elon Musk takeover of the United States, every economic plan, and it's the end of the stock market. Yeah, no one has been right about anything except me, who says you're wrong, and I don't know in which way you're wrong yet. And if this is exactly as it appears, it will be the first thing that is exactly as it appears in about 8 years. That's all I'm saying.
Well, I mean, I do think as someone who had some dealings with Elon, that this does look like Elon unraveling a bit. Is
Elon so clean himself?
Is he clean?
Well, I mean, he just started the ball rolling on the Trump accusation a couple of weeks ago. One of the reasons people are saying that this file isn't being made public is that Elon's accusations must be correct.
Well, no, I'm not going to go there, but I will say that Elon has his own peccadillos.
Yes, exactly.
Out of my profound respect for that man's litigious instincts, I'm going to hold my tongue about what I might think those might be.
Well, I haven't learned that profound respect from experience yet, but maybe what I'm about to say will earn it. Elon is got to preserve something too, not just Trump. Trump's already president. Elon is younger and wants to have a long arc in the future of America, the future of finance, and the future of business worldwide. He wants to be an international oligarch, not just American, in the sense that he has to deal with suppliers and, markets all over the world. Maybe he has the downside. I don't know. All I'm saying is that I can't analyze this except to say, yeah, it really looks bad. But I don't know why it's happening, what it might be leading to, what the event that could put it in context is. And I only look at the past and go, if I was investing the way people are investing in this, in everything from Russiagate to COVID to the vaccine to, whatever, I would have lost all my money by now.
Yeah. Just quickly to answer Bethany, she asked if this was Qbert, who I love. It's not Qbert. It's the Philly Fanatic on my hat. So yes, does Elon have something to lose? He absolutely does, and he's losing it. Let's look at SOT 6, which shows Trump's reaction, and then also some analysis by Bloomberg, which is really interesting.
Let's turn to Tesla. The CEO, Elon Musk, saying he has formed a new political party called the America Party. President Trump.
By the way, who announces a new political party by?
It's always been a two-party system, and I think starting a third party just adds to confusion. It really seems to have been developed for two parties. Third parties have never worked. So he can have fun with it, but I think it's ridiculous.
Joining us now is Bloomberg's Craig Trudell. Craig, the president thinks it's ridiculous. I'm sure some shareholders do too with this move in the pre-market. Before we get into the politics, let's just talk about the company. Craig, what's the condition, the state of operations currently?
Not good. And we got a fresh indication of just how poorly the company is doing last week when they reported another 13% decline in quarterly sales. So, the vehicle deliveries reported for the first quarter, there was, some question as to just how much of this had to do with, Musk and his politicking, and just how much it had to do with the Model Y changeover. That's their most important vehicle.
Oh, okay.
And they have, all of their.
So he's criticizing, talking about the problems at Tesla. Let's look at Harry Anton at CNN, who's after Nate Silver, with whom he used to work at 538, one of the big poll gurus. And he certainly had some things to say about the prospects of the America's Party.
Said he has formed a new party. CNN senior data analyst Harry Enton is here. Let's talk parties, Harry. This new party that Elon Musk says he has founded, what's his base?
Yeah, this entire thing makes very little sense to me. It makes about as much sense as selling sand in the desert. What are we talking about here? What is the size of Elon Musk's base? Well, I calculate it to be about 4%, just 4%, 4% of all voters. What is that base made up of? Well, it's those who view Elon Musk favorably and the GOP unfavorably. We're talking just about 4% of all voters out there, because it turns out most of the people who like Elon Musk already like the GOP already. That is, they already have a party for him. In my mind, there is just no base for Elon Musk's third party in the electorate, at least initially speaking.
All right.
Okay.
When we talk about,
we can stop that. I totally disagree with Anton in principle. If there were a credible third party, the fact that there are people who are GOP favorable, and saying that precludes somebody voting for another party, that's the same mistake they made in 2016. Remember when we were told, Walter, that Trump's unfavorability ratings made it physically impossible for him to win the election, because every pollster in America made the same mistake, not realizing that people could vote for somebody they also considered unfavorable, because they thought somebody else was more unfavorable. which is what happened.
I remember that conventional wisdom. I remember so much. But, you know, I'm old enough that I covered the Reform Party, the Ross Perot Party back when. I went to the Reform Party convention in 2000. 2000 was an interesting year. Perot had lost 2 elections, but his party still had coveted ballot access in many states, maybe 50. And so there was a Reform Party line to be occupied by someone. That year, early on, Donald Trump went to a hotel in Minneapolis, St. Paul with Jesse Ventura, where I was present, and started making noises like he was going to run for president, perhaps as the occupant of this vacant reform spot. It didn't go much further than that. But later in Arlington, Texas, they had their convention, and Pat Buchanan became the nominee. And I had some off-the-record interviews with Pat Buchanan where he blew my mind about, you know, various rumors around the bushes and so on. Now, I'm sure it all went back to the beginning between those different groups. But it was a party that in 1992 decided the presidential election, many say, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
and it was clearly the precursor for the Trump and Sanders movements, I think.
It actually was. And so, and it went from not even on the radar to doing that, you know, just on the strength of one guy and his chalk talks on TV, his sort of paid infomercials where he would, you know, write about the giant sucking sound. So I remember even before that, John Anderson, you know, I forget all the details of John Anderson, but there was a time when he was a kind of a big deal. And then George Wallace.
He got some legit press for about 3 weeks.
Right. So third parties in America, though they may or may not end up having winning candidates, though they did way back when in a couple of cases, can be the difference in politics and in presidential politics. And it's quite recent that they have been. So writing this off as something that, you know, it doesn't make any sense is really the definition of premature.
What's different, though, is that it's Elon, and I just think
I expect it would be a kind of cyber version of libertarianism, basically. It would be the Libertarian Party plus, with allure to different disaffected groups within the two parties now, and those issues would be emphasized, and I think you could pull together 20% in no time.
Yeah, I mean the problem is, look, when Elon did this, the first thing I did is I went and looked to see, well, what's the platform for the American Party or America's Party. There's actually an older party that still has a website up called America's Party, but he makes this announcement there. He doesn't even have a thing ready to tell people what it stands for, and he could have done that easily. Like, you know, a person with his resources could have assigned somebody to write up a platform paper and have a website ready to go, even with 24 or 48 hours notice. But he's so clearly doing things on a whim.
Dude, and you know what the proof of that is? The half-assed name of the party.
Oh, I know.
I'm like, dude, you really spent 15 seconds on that naming process, didn't you?
Yeah, I know. And I thought it would be instructive to go. Let's go back and look at Elon's some of his affect at the CPAC conference earlier this year, just to see where his head has been. And by the way, for him to not make this announcement physically, like, you know, through a video even, was odd. Just to do it in a tweet, which tells you, I think, a little bit about where he's at. But anyway, let's watch. This is who he was just a few months ago.
This is the chainsaw for bureaucracy. I am become meme. Yeah, pretty much. You can't make fun of anything. It's like legalized comedy. Dark Gothic MAGA. You know, I mean, in Europe, they put people in prison for memes.
Javier Milei from Argentina. You guys know what that is, right?
This is the chainsaw for bureaucracy. Chainsaw. So,
all right. So, okay, the sunglasses indoors bit. I think we've all been there, haven't we, Walter? I think we recognize this stage, don't we?
Except it was always my choice in that situation, or what I imagine might be that situation, that I not wear the sunglasses. And I'll tell you why. My grandpa once told me, and this is a little gross, but he said, never apologize for a fart louder than the fart itself. Because people who didn't hear the fart will hear the apology and ask what happened.
Right.
And people who did hear the fart heard it. So never wear sunglasses if your eyes are looking a certain way, because people who can't see your eyes will see the sunglasses from the back row.
Absolutely, yes. And that reminds me, I was recently at a conference. I won't say which one, but I noticed. I said, God, it seems like every second person I talk to has very jaundiced eyeballs, right? Like you know, almost bright yellow. Right. And but you have, if somebody's wearing sunglasses during the day and they're supposed to be holding a you know, an important government position, I don't know. Can I out you for what movie this recalled in your mind? This thing over this weekend, or do you want to talk about that yourself?
Go ahead. I forgot already.
You brought up Citizen Kane.
Oh yeah.
Can we look at the ending of Citizen Kane?
What have you been doing all this time? Playing with a jigsaw puzzle?
If you could have found out what that rosebud meant, I bet that would have explained everything.
Oh, I don't think so. No. Mr. Kane was a man who got everything he wanted and then lost it. If the rosebud was something he couldn't get or something he lost. Anyway, it wouldn't have explained anything. I don't think any word can explain a man's life. No, I guess rosebud is just a piece in a jigsaw puzzle. Missing piece.
Yeah, I went with another literary, well, quasi-literary historical reference.
Citizen Kane, another press baron, also married to a singer. Okay,
that's right.
I could go on, but anyway.
Go on, please go on.
Well, Citizen Kane, press baron, married to a singer, thought to be able to start and end wars at will, and his predecessor, William Randolph Hearst, or his namesake, or whatever the model, was able to do that. Also, someone lonely and rageful at times, which I've heard can happen even to the person we're comparing him to. And so that was my first thought. But I'm going to even add this. Didn't Kane have political ambitions? Didn't he think, I forget the plot of the movie, didn't he think he could basically run things? I mean,
like everybody, I've only seen that movie once. And you know, have you seen it more than once?
Yeah, I have, but
you have? Okay.
My movie memory is bad, especially for movies with complex narratives like that. I forget what Citizen Kane's ultimate, what Charles Foster Kane's ultimate goal was. Did he want to run for office? I think he either did or he wanted to get someone in
political power, basically. Yeah. I can't remember exactly how it worked, but it was more of a Great Gatsby type thing where, you know, he was reaching out toward the Rosebud was his green light, basically, in the end, and he was never able to reach it. And you know, he had everything, but couldn't make himself happy. And it was within his reach the whole time. So yeah, there are some similarities there. I went for a different cultural reference.
Good. A far funnier one, I'm sure. Let's hear it, man.
Let's go to SOT 10 here. Remember, starting at 37 at the 37-minute mark, if we can.
And say that's art. No, not a recognized critic. No. The only reason the critic is to identify it, not if it's good art or bad art, because we don't punish untalented artists in our country. Is it art or is it bogus? Because if you start grading, then you'd end up this position court. We have two books.
This is Lenny Bruce, folks.
Lovers,
1965.
Masterpiece, D.H. Lawrence, and Tract Home Chippy. Now, the appellant seeks a protection that the D.H. Lawrence masterpiece got because he says they've got two couples in each book, so the story's the same, but they're not the same. Because when you go to the bedroom scene with D.H. Lawrence, the man has had a carry. I mean, there's silk sheets, Liebestraum with champagne.
Now he's got to pick up some legal papers sooner or later.
It's a wedding night, and they're both virgins. It's disgusting. Now, the D.H. Lawrence couple go back to them, and another chick has joined the party. He has had to really tell a good horny story. Tract Home Chippy, they've never made it before, and it's just disgusting. I mean, the guy wore no contraceptive and is conveying a semen before the penetration. Sex in its lowest form to have children.
All right, we can go on. Lenny Bruce at the end of his life, great comedian who ended up going on stage in raincoats and carrying wads of legal papers and ranting in incoherent ways.
Reading
kind of had the world's
reading from the newspaper, or legal briefs and stuff like that. I don't know. That's the one that I remembered. But what is the salient point of comparison here?
Well, he had everybody's attention. He was a magnetic, much respected countercultural. Not much respected. He was an impactful countercultural figure who suddenly kind of lost it. And even while he had enormous cachet and was still drawing big crowds, he just kind of fell apart in the middle of it. And I mean, if that's what's going on with Elon, look, I don't know how you feel sorry for somebody who has that much money, but
okay. So all I can report about Elon is this: my sources, and some rather close to the person, are themselves confused. First of all, I'm told Trump's hurt like a father, in the sense that he's personally pained by Elon's apparent desertion. Okay. Number two, that Elon's problems inside the administration with the likes of Scott Bessent and a man named Sergio Gore, who is in charge of the hiring for the White House and so on, are apparently real. I've been told. And thirdly, that I've also been told it's all fake by someone who would be in a position to know how Elon operates traditionally, but maybe not how Trump operates. Okay. So that all adds up in journalistic terms to a big, fat, nothing dinner party bullshit session. Okay. I have no insight further than that into the real. I've never met the guy. I actually did meet him once. I met him at an Oscar party in 2010 when he just had a Roadster, which George Clooney had a model of. And I asked Elon about it. He was not yet Elon Musk. He did not loom large in the public consciousness. He just had this little company that had developed an electric sports car. And he said, come on out and drive it, man. And he didn't know who I was, and I wasn't worthy of, any of that attention. But he was a nice guy. That's the one time I met him, And ever since then, it's just been story after story, most of which don't jive with each other, and a lot of behind-the-scene glimpses of a guy who is temperamental.
Yeah, I mean, look, I obviously did deal with him. He was always, until the end, when it went crazy, in a split second. He was pretty good to me. I will say he was extremely hard to read. Remember that scene in the first Superman movie where Chris Reeves can't see what's inside the box because it's made of lead, and doesn't know that there's kryptonite in there. That's what Elon's psyche was. I could not read him at all. I couldn't figure out what he was after. He would, talk to you in one way, and then 5 minutes later you'd be having a conversation, and it was as if he had forgotten all the details of the previous conversation. His affect would change on a dime, but he didn't get in our way. Like, the only thing he ever did, everybody always thought he was stage managing the Twitter files. The one time he peeked his head into the room where all of us were working, he basically leaned in and said, "You guys need some coffee or anything?" And that was basically it. No, we dealt with lawyers that worked for Elon, but not Elon. Right. But he did seem to have it a little bit more together back then than he did now. Now, the thing that you're talking about is interesting because, the scuffle with Scott Bessent, and Sergio Gore is the other one, right? I've been thinking a lot about this, and this is a good segue into the other thing we're going to talk about today, which is the Democrats apparently believing they need to up their, how do we put it, confrontational game. Is this sort of WWE-ization of politics? It could be both things are true at once, that there's a legitimate disagreement between Trump and Musk, but also that it's totally kayfabe, and that
one source told me, pretty good one, that it was over what you might think it was over and what Trump said it was over, which is the EV tax credit. That Trump ran openly against that, and Elon didn't like that it was pulled in the big beautiful bill, and that is the source of the conflict. One person who I would credit as someone who's met both of them and hangs out with both of them told me that was the case. I just throw it all in the pot, but I will add this. There is crossover between the Epstein business and this. There just is, because the beginning of that feud was Trump's on the Epstein list. That was day one of the feud. And there is some integration between these two issues, and I don't know what it is, and I can't speculate with any authority on it, obviously, but I'm going to reiterate what I said at the beginning of the broadcast. Some people think we're at the beginning of a book, and the rest of the book is going to be just like the beginning, which I know never happens in books or movies or any dramatic tale. Some people think that we're at the end of a book and we just saw the climax and it's going to be like this from here on out. Just like if people get married at the end of the story, they stay happily ever after married. But I know, and I know for sure, we're in the middle of a book. And
absolutely.
And in the middle of a narrative, you don't have damn idea. You're sitting there with your date making guesses about what comes next. And all I'm doing is reserving the right to sit next to my date and make wild guesses about what comes next. Because if the thing is either well written or resembles actual reality, one can't know for sure at this point.
Yeah, it feels like a lot of this is sort of made for modern media claptrap. Like, for instance, last week there was a back and forth between Trump and Zohran Mamdani, where I think Mamdani said something to the effect of if elected, I'm not going to allow ICE to arrest people. And then the next thing he did, they flashed to Donald Trump, and Trump did is kind of gesticulating, well, we might have to arrest him, and if he does that, and then Mamdani came right back with
elbows up,
well, everybody's just gonna have we're gonna have to band together, you know, when that happens. This is straight out of how you write a WWE promo. Like you start with an emotional appeal at the beginning, then there's like a call to action at the end, right? There's always a threat and a call to action at the end, and a lot of pointing at the screen. There's some other details that I remember being told about, like that the interviewer always has to be significantly shorter than the talent. But this sort of WWE style of like political confrontation has been dominating everything lately. And you know, Trump is obviously he's a WrestleMania veteran. He knows how to do this stuff. He's great at it. I just don't know whether this is something that's organically coming out of Elon or whether it's some kind of stunt. Whatever it is, it's bizarre either way, right?
Yeah, and you know, not to just keep beating a dead horse, but I'm going to hazard a wild theory that the Epstein list, if there is such a thing, I mean, I don't know where it was implanted. I mean, I know Pam Bondi said there was one, but where it was implanted that there's like a Madam Black book, you know, in other words, that there's some central registry of Epstein clients, you know. I don't know that I would have kept one. I'm always surprised when there is a black book in these matters that people actually, you know, wrote it down. But
right,
in any
it's like
case,
a Chandler novel. It'd be in code, right?
Yeah. But imagine that there's someone on the Epstein list that's not Donald Trump, who is absolutely crucial to the functioning of the United States and maybe to its military industrial complex. And that keeping that person in the role that we wish them to be for national security means a lot of flack and a lot of chatter and chaff to distract from that. That's another theory on what's happening. That who's being that the people being protected are people who are too big to fail in not just a media or fame sense or Prince Andrew sense, but because they stand at the center of American military power. That would be worth sacrificing your short-term or maybe midterm or maybe even long-term political credibility.
Yeah, or somebody else's military power. Right?
Or someone else's, yes.
Yeah.
And I know that everyone will interpret that as meaning, you know, whatever.
Yeah.
But Israel. But I just can't tell you how this is going to turn out, but I can tell you that there's a twist and a turn that I can't see, but I can't see around, but I can see the turn.
Walter, we have a question from Spacey11 here. What is kayfabe? You want to take that or
Kayfabe is the pro wrestling term for performative conflict, which is scripted such that you are absorbed by the spectacle. You're absorbed into the feuds. You're absorbed into the symbolism of who stands for what. It tends to involve very exaggerated role playing. You know, I represent the USA. I represent Mother Russia. You know, and it usually involves also hard pivots in the script where suddenly enemies team up and against another wrestler, or two friends find out that the one is sleeping with the other guy's wife and now they must fight.
I mean, it's amazing. I almost wish that I had gone into that line of work instead of this.
Matt,
the writing is really good.
Matt, do you remember that at the Republican convention almost exactly a year ago, we met briefly the former head writer for the World Wrestling Foundation.
We did.
And he was involved with the Republican. He had been involved at one point with the planning of the Republican convention. Now that's a data point for you. The World Wrestling Foundation's head writer actually became part of the Republican establishment.
and you should not be surprised by that at all, because it's so clearly part of the formula of American politics by now. And what's so funny is that even people who are slipping into it, because and we're going to get to this in a second, the Democrats have started to take this turn. They don't know a whole lot about wrestling, I don't think, but that's where this comes from. Kayfabe, by the way, also describes a code by which a secret code by which the writers live. You must never break kayfabe. There's an expression in wrestling, so that it's like the suspension of disbelief in a movie, or what is it, the fourth wall, the third wall, right? Yeah. When typically in wrestling there are two characters. There's the heel and the face, or the baby face. So the heel is the villain, baby face is the good guy. And as you say, Walter, part of the trick of wrestling is that sometimes the crowd turns on the face and loves the heel, and vice versa. And the job of the heel is always to get the crowd worked up, to say the most outrageous things, so that people are spitting mad, and then they finally come and meet in the ring, and then maybe at the end of the show you end up liking the heel. And this is clearly something that Donald Trump has learned from wrestling, because he plays the heel all the time.
And like the magician's code, in which you never give away the secret of an illusion to the public, you keep it among the guild members. You're right. Kayfabe does involve secrecy, planning, and keeping a straight face during what are fake presentations, right? So in order to carry out kayfabe, you got to have all those elements. And one of the ways I think it's easy to do in pro wrestling is that it's so exaggerated that no one is actually inspecting you to see if you're flinching, to see if you're blinking, to see if you're doing whatever. Everything is bombastic and huge. And that, in a weird way, makes deception easier, because you're acting in a way that isn't subject to normal human scrutiny about little deceptions. This Trump administration does have that quality, but not just the Trump administration, American political reality. I mean, Mamdani is a bigger character than one would expect. Trump's obviously a bigger character. Musk's a bigger character. Most of them are in the top line now. And trying to scrutinize them in the way we used to when it was like George Bush or Bill Clinton or something doesn't really work, because the heat coming off and the glare coming off the performances is almost blinding.
Yeah. And Mamdani is, I think, the first Democrat who's embraced the pro wrestling.
Good point. Great
vibe. And he gets it in a way that a lot of the rest of the party doesn't. And we're going to talk for a moment about how they're still trying to do it without doing it. But many years ago, in 2016, just as Trump was getting elected, there was a wrestler. He may still be wrestling, who went by the name the Progressive Democrat. And he used to wear this hilarious shirt that just had Hillary's face like all over, like repeated on a pattern. And he would get up and, in these audiences in West Virginia and Appalachia, and talk about how you're all deplorable, and and basically repeat her party platform. And then he would go out and wrestle somebody. And I interviewed this guy, and he talked about how, look, the heel's job is to generate heat. That's all. That's the entire purpose of the act is to make the room hot, right? And he says Trump does the same thing I do, right? He makes the room hot. The media loves it, and you can spin that any way you want to, once you got the eyeballs, right? And the Democrats never.
And who doesn't have the eyeballs right now? The Democrats, except for one guy, Mamdani in New York.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Which is well, we can get into that too. I mean, the whole phenomenon of what's going on with the overall polling numbers for both parties is so weird. I've never seen anything like this situation where nobody's gaining, or when they do. I mean, Trump right now in the last couple of weeks has been gaining, but we've had this situation where both parties have gone down kind of overall for a while, which has been interesting. So, okay, there was an article in Axios. When was this? Just today it came out. And the headline is incredible. Democrats told to get shot for the anti-Trump resistance, and it's a reporter, Andrew Solender, who got a bunch of quotes from Democratic House members and analysts and strategists, and basically what it's saying is that our voters want us to act out more, right? So there's a quote at the top. Let's see. The idea that we're going to save every norm and we're not going to play Republicans' game, I don't think that's resonating with voters anymore, said one House Democrat. Another told Axios that, quote, a sense of fear and despair and anger among voters, quote, puts us in a different position where we can't keep following norms of decorum.
Because their voters won't let them.
Yeah. Brad Schneider from Illinois. We've got people who are desperately wanting us to do something. No matter what we say, they want more. Then there's a quote down at the bottom. What is it saying? Our own base is telling us that what we're doing is good enough, that there needs to be blood to grab the attention of the press and the public.
Dude, can you fucking imagine? Can you freaking imagine if conservative Republican leaders came out and said our constituents are calling for blood? Dude, social media would be shut down by law enforcement tomorrow. As it was controlled for much less in the name of right-wing extremism back when.
I mean, listen to this stuff. A fourth House Democrat said constituents have told them civility isn't working and to prepare for quote, violence to protect our democracy. Us the story. Then it's like the seeing people want more and more spectacle, and then the headline quote is down the bottom. Where's the one about getting shot? Hang on. Yeah. Some suggested that what we really need, we need to be willing to get shot when visiting ICE facilities or federal agencies. So, and the heel of it, Walter, I was actually talking, ended out because there had been so many forced. Just to go back to history, SOT 19. This is during the just before.
Matt, your connection is bad.
No,
people are. I'm hearing it bad, and people in the comments are hearing it bad.
Okay.
Can you hear me well? Are you?
How about now? Can you hear me?
Yes. Yeah, I can.
Mr. Producer, are we okay?
Sounds better to me now.
How are we doing, folks?
Carry on. I haven't heard it go bang yet.
Okay. So this is from just before the big during the big anti-ICE protests in Los Angeles. This is Maxine Waters trying to get into an ICE detention facility.
Hello. Congresswoman Waters, I just came to use my congressional authority.
Ma'am, our lobby is secure right now to all visitors.
Excuse me, I need to get in.
Contact our public affairs office.
I need to get in. What are you hoping to do?
Okay, so that's it. So that was a very compelling video. Not really. And then there was the Alex Padilla incident, where
there's an incident today, almost as we speak, with Karen Bass in MacArthur Park in Los Angeles.
I'll hunt that down while we watch this. Hang on a minute.
Guys, ready? And bell. Sir, hands up. I'm Senator Alex Padilla. I have questions for the secretary, because the fact of the matter is a half a dozen violent criminals that you're rotating on your.
I also want to know how many of our ICE agents have been docked or
On the ground. Hands behind your back. Hands behind your back.
If you don't my hands, go ahead, put behind my back.
All right. Cool. One hand. Lay flat. Lay flat.
Other hand, sir. Other hand.
Okay, and then there was the LaMonica McIver incident. Do we have that? I think that's SOT 20.
Christine Johnson. And I'm Jessica Moore. The woman representing New Jersey District 10 is now facing felony charges.
Congresswoman Monica McIver is denying any wrongdoing after federal agents say that she interfered during the arrest of Newark's mayor outside an ICE detention facility. The confrontation on body cameras has sparked backlash from Capitol Hill to her home district. And Nick Calloway has more.
Democratic Congresswoman LaMonica McIver, seen in red, now facing felony charges after that May 9th skirmish at Delaney Hall in Newark. Charging documents included still frames from police body cameras alleging McIver shoved and grabbed federal officers as they were arresting Newark Mayor Ras Baraka. Prosecutors say she and others attempted to thwart the arrest, yelling, "Circle the mayor." McIver disputes the accusations.
I was there to do my job along with my other colleagues. We have done this before. This is our obligation to do. It's in our job description to have oversight over a facility, and the entire situation was escalated by ICE.
President Donald Trump weighed in on the charges Tuesday.
She was shoving federal agents. She was out of control. The days of that crap are over in this country. We're going to have law and order.
In Washington, D.C., members of the Congressional Black Caucus stood in support of Congresswoman McIver.
The President of the United States has weaponized his Department of Justice in an attempt to make a young Congresswoman from New Jersey the focal point of his efforts to intimidate Congress into submission.
Walter, what do you think about all this? I mean,
all I know is, having been on TV, Matt, if you wear red to something, that's because you want to be the focal point of the camera.
That is true. If anybody who's been through media training, they do tell you that if you want to stand out at a public event, to wear red. I'd totally forgotten that, but that is true. Yeah. Look, Axios quotes all these people who are talking about this. They have another person who says, when I see a fire, my instinct is to reach for the extinguisher. But now they're telling us, what about gasoline instead?
Okay. Here's what I think of the Axios article, and let me read a paragraph that really jumped out at me. Okay, what they're saying is our constituents are demanding that we get into violent confrontations. Okay, and we are a little loath or resistant to do that, but the pressure is overwhelming. And so someone says this. I don't think that they're not identified. What I have seen is a demand that we get ourselves arrested intentionally or allow ourselves to be victims of violence. Okay, and not only would that be a gift to Donald Trump, we are a group that is disproportionately people of color, women, LGBTQ people who do not fare very well in prison.
That's in that article. I didn't even see that.
It's right at the end.
Yeah.
It's right at the end. Like, listen, listen, I know you guys want us to fight with fire extinguishers and punch back and get arrested and maybe even shot. But if we do that, we'll go to prison, and we're not cut out for prison, man. You know what? This dude, this kind of rhetoric is beyond anything that I've ever seen. Lawmakers saying, like, we'd love to fight, but we don't want to go to prison because we're the kind of people who get beat up there. What? I mean, it's what do I think of it? I think that they've gone crazy. I mean, I think
especially talking to a reporter. And by the way, Axios has been doing this for a while. This little column that they do, where they kind of talk to people pseudonymously or anonymously.
Dude, if I did a column like that and put it together, what a wild column! It would make this thing look like nothing.
Oh, I know. But the reason people talk to you is because they know it's not going to end up in print. Right. These people know it's going in print, which is crazy. They're telling you outright that a lot of the stuff we're doing because our constituents ask us to. And you can tell that's the case because a lot of the people who are getting into trouble are very calm and composed folks who are able to keep their cool and suddenly are getting into Jerry Springer fights on television. What's that all about?
Well, so they're doing one of a couple of things, and I can't decide which. Maybe they're doing both at once. They're setting the stage for more confrontations. In other words, they plan to go to this direct action route, and they're giving us warning that that's what they're doing, and they're telling us what a sacrifice it will be. They're only doing it because they've been pushed by David Brooks, J.B. Pritzker, and their constituents. Remember, because
David Brooks, who in an alternate lifetime definitely was not the head of WWE, but it's so funny that he's playing that role. Yeah.
And another thing that comes in this article is that the members of the minorities that are, in the legislature are saying it's white people pushing us to do it. It actually is in the article. It's saying our white, well-heeled suburban people are telling us to get violent.
I mean, what is that about? Yeah, many lawmakers said these voters tend to be white, well-educated, and live in upscale suburban or urban neighborhoods. What I have seen is a demand that we get ourselves arrested intentionally, or allow ourselves to be victims of violence. A lot of times that's coming from economically very secure white people.
So either they're setting the stage for more of this, or they're making world's funniest excuse for being Black or LGBTQ and not responding to white Princetonians who are calling them and telling them to mix it up. Listen, this is Professor Harold McMillian from Harvard University. Could I speak to Jamal? Jamal, I'd like you to get out there and get arrested.
Yeah, can you get your head caved in a little bit?
Yeah, listen, Professor, I know that you're there at Harvard where you have good security, but we down here don't do so good in jail.
It's really unbelievable. Now, the one thing that I heard that I thought was interesting and might be, it could pass for kind of I don't agree with it, but it almost sounds like somebody's intellectual argument for why to do this. Can we look at the SOT 18 and start at about the 1 minute mark? This is Cory Booker defending the Alex Padilla incident.
He's one of the people of true character here. And I think that's why today has hurt so many of us personally, is because of what this breach of this body actually means to all of us. Mm-hmm. We know the dangers of violence in a democracy.
January 6th.
And the insidiousness that violence presents, or that fear of violent reprisal presents. Jefferson said it so eloquently: when people fear their government, there is tyranny. When the government fears its people, there is liberty.
Okay, there we go.
Dude, he's going to raise the Gadsden flag. This guy sounds. Corey sounds like he's from the free state of New Hampshire right now.
I know.
To me, you know?
The free state of Newark. Yeah.
Okay, so I just had an idea here. First of all, it could be that Axios has cobbled together this big story out of a bunch of bar talk in various bars in Washington.
Well,
and
that's the way all these pieces get written. But anyway,
right, and tried to present it as a trend. That's probably Occam's razor explanation for it. Okay. Secondly, maybe these politicians who like their salaries and like their nicely padded stock accounts and so on are going like, hey man, we need to make an excuse for why we're not all getting arrested because we created a monster and it's wanting us to get out there and scrape it up and maybe go to jail and maybe face legal peril. And we really don't want to do that. We kind of like our lives.
Yeah. Also, it's politically not smart. And I think one of the things they're trying to communicate to voters, and this is something that is a long-standing, I think, issue, is that people have a limited understanding of what the minority party can do in a situation like this. And so they scream and yell, why don't you do something? Why don't you do something about X, Y, or Z? And there really isn't a whole lot that the other party can do. I mean, there are a few things, but the outsized expectations, and this is the subtext of a lot of these comments coming from the people that Axios interviewed, they're asking us to do something that we're not capable of doing right now, and so they just want to see
which is be martyrs. Well,
right.
Well, what they really are saying is, listen, we're ineffective. We just lost. That Axios puts a big press conference at the top of this story, and it's a press conference of mass legislators on the steps of the Capitol after the passage of the big beautiful bill. That's how they illustrate this story, and the story is basically, listen, we're screwed. Okay, we're gonna have to wait till midterms. We've been outmaneuvered, and we're politically impotent. And please stop asking us to riot because that's what others do, but not us. We lead by example. Suddenly, what's so strange about it is after having celebrated, civil disobedience and getting in people's faces and so on, they're suddenly like, maybe we're moving into a trap. Let's be reserved about this. Maybe they actually are afraid of their own supporters at this point, because that can happen. That can happen.
It can happen. Yeah. I mean,
why was Yitzhak? Who assassinated Yitzhak Rabin? Someone to his. In other words, actually, I think that was an ultra orthodox person. But what I'm saying is sometimes, and it happened in the Russian Revolution, as you know, if you're on the left, someone to your left becomes your enemy because you're not being sufficiently pure, sufficiently engaged, sufficiently, assertive. And maybe that's starting to happen within the Democratic Party. They're starting to fracture along, intensity lines. And these people are starting to get afraid of their own people. Maybe they're starting to get threats from their own people.
That's probably true. They also, if they're going to make this move, if they're going to do this, they have to systematically make a departure from their years-long campaign of identifying themselves as protectors of norms, right? Because, and that's what they're saying in this piece, that we can't go along with norms anymore.
Well, they're saying they're being told that. They're not saying that themselves.
Yeah, right. No, but they're being told that. But they have to signal that if they're going to do it, they have to signal it, because otherwise they're going to get hammered on all the rhetoric that they took against, you know, everything from J6 to whatever, right? I don't know. I'm trying to figure it out. I mean, it looks it's such a bad idea, and it makes it. But
once again, we
makes us look so weak. You know, I don't know, but
we may be misled by Axios having cobbled this together from six bar conversations, but
it makes sense though, Walter. I was even asking this question myself. To, you know, has somebody told them to do this shit? Because of the so many of these incidents were so forced, especially the Padilla one. Like that was
but they haven't worked so far, Matt. And this is a climb down. This piece is a climb down. This is them reproaching the people who are asking for radical action, saying, "Don't you understand? We don't do well in jail.
Right.
Don't you understand? There's only so much we can do. Stop pushing us, radical fringe. Stop pushing us." The plain meaning of this is we're getting threatened by our own. We're getting threatened by our own activists for not doing more. We've sort of tried. It hasn't come to much. And listen, we don't do well in jail. So back off, man.
I mean, what wimps though? Like either do it or don't. You know what I mean? If you don't want to do it, don't be like whining off the record or actually on the record in some of these cases to a reporter that you don't want to do it. But yeah, whenever you look at these incidents and it looks like they're psyching themselves up for you know, a shtick. Remember when Peter McNeely fought Mike Tyson after he got out of jail? Remember that fight? He was like a Boston boxer with a mullet. He was totally overmatched, and it was like Tyson's first fight after getting out of jail, and McNeely was like 1,000,000 to 1 underdog, and you know, he's like a club fighter basically.
Right.
And before the bell, you could see him going like, all right. And then he like runs to the center of the ring and just gets, you know, his ass kicked immediately. That's what Alex Padilla looked like when he was barging into that room. It's like, okay, I got to do this, you know.
But Alex Padilla is disposable to the National Party. Okay, people barely knew who he was. We've had to be trained. I didn't even realize California got another senator. You know,
I know.
He can be disposed of. Cory Booker doesn't want to get in a scrap. Okay. He really doesn't. And he doesn't want to be forced to. And he doesn't want the Luigi wing of the Democratic Party or the Mamdani wing of the Democratic Party to be pushing him and calling him a wimp for not doing stuff.
No, I mean, I had a very nice chat with Cory Booker once in New Hampshire at a diner. I always got the impression that he was a smart. Actually, my first thought after talking to him was, why is a guy like this in such a shitty business? He seemed like a decent dude to me. I don't think he wants to be doing this. But look, this thing, if they keep it up, I guess it's a media strategy. But they're doing it wrong. Mamdani is doing it right.
But you see, Matt, it's happening to the Republicans too right now, because the Republican, the woke right or the influencer on social media is pushing Trump from his right all the time. You know, you dupe of Israel, you freaking sellout, you pedophile now, whatever. Both parties are getting pressure from their extreme wings. And maybe that's a feature of the social media age and the informational ecosystem in which we exist now, that you're going to be constantly pushed by the people who pay no price for calling for radical action because they're doing it on damn Twitter under assumed names.
Right. Yeah. No, I mean, it'll be interesting to see how this all plays out. And look, it doesn't really mean anything except that it's a signal that there might be a shift in media strategy by one party, or that they're bereft of ideas. That might be another thing that's going on here.
Well, the thing about the big beautiful bill, which passed, and we haven't talked about it, it was touch and go. It seemed.
I think we should do that on the next show, maybe. Unless war breaks out before then.
The thing about it, and I don't even like name checking it, but they called it that, so I have to. Is that it was about 20 or 30 pieces of major legislation rolled into one. In other words, the whole reason they did it this way is so that they didn't have to pass piecemeal 30 or 40 different bills that would be controversial, cause debate, and so on. They forced it all into one big, rolled up spitball the size of a soccer ball and pushed it over the goal line. It represents for the Democrats not just one legislative defeat, but about 40. And it kind of, in a way, puts them in a permanently, the Republicans don't have to fight them anymore, except on maybe appointments and, if Supreme Court things come up and so on, because they just got their legislative agenda passed in one go. So what is the Cory Booker world of Democratic legislature supposed to do for the next year and a half?
Yeah, run against stuff. That's what. Yeah, it's tough. I don't know. The most serious opposition is in the courts, and that's not really the job of the legislature. And so this just gives us a peek into what's happening, behind the scenes in terms of how they're thinking about messaging. And let's see if there are more of these things. You mentioned there's something involving Karen Bass. I haven't seen it yet, but we'll keep an eye out for it. But it's a good segue into our new book, because after talking about doing a couple of sort of classics of dystopian fiction, I guess you would call them, right? The first one being 1984, and then Catch-22, which is kind of the great bureaucratic war satire. We're reading Evelyn Waugh's Scoop. And for those of you who have had the good fortune to have never worked in the media business, basically every reporter in the world has a copy of this book somewhere, especially the foreign correspondents. And this is, I think it's the great satire of journalism that's been written. What year was Scoop written in, Walter? I can't remember. Hang on a second.
I would guess the 30s.
It has to be the 30s, I think, because of the way the characters, the structure is made up. But should we give a short overview? Or it's 1938 is when it was written. So I thought just for today, for people who haven't read this book, we could just go through the setup, because this book has one of the great constructions or setups of any comic novel I've ever read. It takes a little while, but it's a mistaken identity story, but it's really kind of beautifully done. Do you want to do it, or how should we go through this?
Well, first of all, let me confess to our audience that I had not read Scoop before, even though
really?
Matt says,
oh my God! Oh wow!
Nope. Even though Matt says every self-respecting journalist and funny guy has a copy on his desk, I never have. And I'm a Waugh fan. I'm a Waugh fan, but I've never read it. So I started it when we came up with the idea.
Yeah, sorry about that. I assumed. I didn't know. Okay.
Well, I'm just giving our audience a little comfort and company in the fact that they probably are just getting going too, or haven't at all. So I'm starting it, and I'm about as far as the setup, and it's this. There is a press baron in England, and what's his name? It's
you mean the famous correspondent?
No, the press baron who hires the correspondent,
Lord
the
Copper.
guy, yeah, Lord Copper, and he is pressed by a female aristocrat who seems to be a kind of fixer in the world of journalism.
Mrs. Algernon Stitch.
Mrs. Olgin Unstitched, she does favors for all the bright young things in the world of journalism and so on. And I have lived in England, and I have been to, Oxford University and so on. So I can attest to the kind of social structure that this book describes and how people get jobs in England. And they do indeed go to people like this, noble woman.
Stitch.
Yeah. And so she gets this idea that this best-selling novelist, who's very au courant at the moment, and
John Courtney Boot.
Yeah, John Courtney Boot should be hired by the newspaper as a foreign correspondent. And she knows very little about this Boot besides his name and the fact that, his novel Waste of Time.
Wait, here's the description of what Waste of Time is about. Waste of Time, a studiously modest description of some harrowing months among the Patagonian Indians.
So this Boot is the sensation of the salons of literary London for his book Waste of Time, about some unfortunate incidents among some
He's
colonial,
Thomas Friedman, basically. Yeah,
colonial subject.
Yeah.
And his star is rising, and she decides to take his case to Lord Copper. And he, much like Citizen Kane,
just to interject, she specifically wants him to cover the civil war in Ishmaelia, which is
an African country.
It's Abyssinia in real life. This is
what we know is Ethiopia now.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and so he decides, well, I've never heard of this Boot character, but maybe somebody in my organization has. And I'll send out the order. We should have someone there anyway. The lady is right. So he gives his editor, some editor-in-chief at his paper, which is called The Daily Beast. It's where Tina Brown apparently got the name for her publication.
It's so embarrassing that they named that publication after this. But anyway, go ahead.
Right. And the Daily Beast's competition is the Daily Brute. And apparently these are inside jokes and refer to specific papers, like the Daily Brute is the Express, which is kind of one of the lowest of the tabloids over there in England. I mean, people don't understand tabloid journalism here. They think of the National Enquirer or the New York Post.
This is an old thing from Fleet Street. Yeah.
Right. In England, I mean, when I was there in the 80s and you opened one of the real tabloid papers in London, you opened it up on a swimsuit girl with giant monster boobs and like lottery results and crap like that, like made
the page 3 girl. Yeah.
Yeah. It's barely news, and so the idea that they have to have a correspondent in, Ishmaelia is funny in itself. Instantly that this correspondent is going to be not really getting real news. They're just going to be using the byline to tell tales, because these papers are barely set up for real reporting. I mean, remember how Boris Johnson, a classmate of mine at Oxford, or a contemporary of mine at Oxford, he was a reporter too at the beginning, and there was some question as to whether all of his stories panned out factually and so on. But the British have a relationship to facts in journalism that's a little more liberal than
a little more relative, and they really explore that theme a lot just in the first couple of chapters. But you can go ahead.
So Copper the Lord calls down to his minions, and
he calls down to his foreign editor, whose name is Salter, who is a person who lives a life of blameless domesticity. And the one descriptive scene of him is that he's looking at an atlas trying to find Reykjavik, but failing. So this is your foreign editor who doesn't know where Iceland is. Yeah.
Right. And the foreign editor remembers that they do have Boot on staff. He actually works for the paper already. He's a nature writer who contributes nature columns with prose that is just unbelievably funny. what's the one sentence about the
feather-footed through the plashy fen passes the questing vole.
Feather-footed.
It's a column called Lush Places.
Lush Places, and he thinks, well, what luck! The noblewoman has recommended someone we already keep on staff as a nature writer. Of course, we can send him off to Africa. And I love the line where, you know, he tells the editor, and money is no object.
Right.
In other words, you know, pay him whatever he asks. And then he sort of catches himself and realizes he said that once in the past, that it led to a £5,000 a year, 5-year contract for somebody. And it's like, you know, but not like that again.
Right.
So there's your setup. This purple prose nature writer who, you know, is some boob who exists at the very lowest level of the paper, is about to get sent off as a wartime correspondent to Africa because they confused him with this modish, fashionable novelist and the author of Waste of Time.
Yeah, so they confused John Boot for William Boot, okay? And right. John Boot is this, he's sort of a classic, you know, weather-beaten correspondent. He wants to go to war. He wants to go to a war zone to get away from a girl, and he's got some other problem. He's like probably extreme self-hatred too. Like that's there's a little bit of that in the undercurrent. Like I just need to get out of London. And so he goes to his aristocratic friend, and this is how things are done. The friend goes to the lord who runs the newspaper, who of course doesn't know anything about anything, and then says to the underling, you know, put Boot on it. And then so they call up this William Boot. Now there's already one improbability that's been sort of woven into the plot, which is that there are two Boots and they're confused. But the other one is that William Boot, the nature columnist, has just made the biggest mistake of his life. He writes a column that is essentially passed down in hereditary fashion, this Lush Places column. It was previously some other relative of his from his estate, and he's a country person. He never goes to the city, even though they're wealthy. All the wealthy relatives, they won't die, and so everyone else is on this tiny allowance, and he never leaves home. But he had just written this huge article about the habits of the badger, and his sister Priscilla had gone through just like Catch-22 and replaced badger with great crested grebe, and then sent it into the newspaper, which in turn printed it. So if we could see a picture of the great crested grebe for a moment. So he had basically in the paper, in the Daily Beast, there's a whole thing about how this animal is eating rabbits, and you know is a terrible, vicious, you know, mammal or whatever it is, and it gets all kinds of complaints. And so William Boot, when he's summoned to England, expects that it's to be fired over the great crested grebe mistake, and it turns out that when he's summoned to the foreign editor's office, that actually he's being sent to Africa, into Ishmailia, and it has nothing to do with the great crested grebe. And he's relieved, but it's a great setup, because part of the joke here is that he absolutely should be fired for making, well, probably maybe not fired, but certainly reprimanded, and the paper should certainly recognize the fact that, you know, that. But
no one has noticed.
No one has noticed. There's one letter. A major in Wales challenged him categorically to produce a single authenticated case of a great crested grebe attacking young rabbits. But of course, the editors pay no attention because, as you say, Walter, on Fleet Street, you know, facts schmacks, right?
Okay, so I once worked not in journalism in England, but in in a law firm, a firm of solicitors. Okay. And I was a private detective, and I got this job out of university and through some connections. And here was how the job went. 10 a.m., show up. 11:30 a.m., start talking to people about which pub you're going to for lunch. Maybe 11:45, nip out a little early. Get back 1:30. Lay down on your desk along with the partners. Put your head down. Wake up around 3. Go out into the hall to show your conscience and talk about business for a few minutes. Then a cart would come by with tea. Drink your tea and what they call orange squash, which is Tang in those days. They didn't, I mean, even in the mid 1980s, they didn't have like full on orange juice in a lot of British settings. Drink your tea, drink your orange squash, leave, go to, if you're one of the partners, go down to your club at Pall Mall, one of your gentlemen's clubs, and start drinking in earnest.
Right. Yes.
Until the damn sherry and postprandial courses at 10 o'clock, walk home blind drunk, do it again. So these are the people that populate the journalism world in Waugh too. And the nature of his satire is not, it's a little different than Heller's satire. Heller's satirizing a world in which there's so much bureaucracy and so many rules that they all conflict, and they're all meaningless, and they're all circular, and nobody knows what to make of anything and is paralyzed by bureaucratic, complexity. In Waugh's England, the thing that's worthy of satire and that paralyzes everybody is that everything sort of has to do with rank. Right. And there's no way you can fall out of a rank. And for those who are of lower rank, there's no way you can ever really get up any higher, but you will have to try constantly, And so the nature of and structure of the society is such that nothing really matters, but you have to act as though it does.
Right. Yes, exactly. And it's perfect that that this book is about journalism, because basically he's constantly writing about all these other dynamics that are in play and what's important in each situation. And the one thing that's not important in any situation anywhere in this book is what actually is going on.
Right. Covering the war, the war. Except in a world where nothing gets done, and getting nothing done is almost the point, because the hierarchy is already fixed. The one funny thing you can do is the job.
Right.
In other words, the one thing you can do is get the scoop. And the irony of the book will be that the lesser boot, the poet of the grebe and the vole and the badger, is actually going to turn out to be a not bad war correspondent.
Yeah, he's going to be pretty good at it. He's going to go off to Africa. And this is a book, I've seen people complain that this is a book that conservatives like, and I guess I understand that, but
why do they think conservatives like it more than anyone else?
Like there's somebody who put it on a list of like 13 books that conservatives will love,
because it makes fun of the press.
It makes fun of the press. It makes fun of socialists, but it also makes fun of the other side. I mean, the war they're going to end up covering is essentially between the communists and the fascists.
And it also makes fun of press barons and the aristocracy.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think it's a very equal opportunity kind of a satire. And I think it's, in that sense, it's misunderstood. It's also, you talk about what's different between Waugh and Heller. He obviously, this writer is a lot more like Graham Greene. He's a writer whose prose kind of flows, and soars a little bit, right? Whereas Heller is a bit more of like a shtick. I don't know, how would you put the difference in style?
Well, so Waugh is funny because he's devastatingly accurate about the esoteric codes of the British class system. Okay, early on in the book, and remember, he's what you would call a bright young thing. We don't live in quite as stratified a class system, but even Waugh is a wit who went to Oxford, got an incredible literary education, has never touched a greasy tool in his life, and who early in the book describes someone, the noblewoman going down the street and passing people who are digging up pipes and electric cables, and he describes them as doing some sort of mining for the things that make the city function.
It's a great mystery to him, right? Yeah,
right. The snobs are all geniuses about advancement, rank, and credentialism, and absolutely morons about how the world works, and they want to keep it that way.
And that's why this book is still so relevant to the present, is because what he describes in 1938 Fleet Street, Britain, this obsession with credentialism, over accuracy, over everything, turns out to be exactly the thing that destroyed modern media. We don't have quite the comic background that the British do with their journalistic history, but that part of it is still completely true. The whole, the snobism about who carries whose credentials and who gets sent where, and if we write it, it's true. It doesn't matter what actually happened. Like that whole thing, that's still very much part of the business.
We're a relatively youthful nation and culture here in the United States, okay? But in England, it's a relatively old one. It's had a long, long time to grow corrupt, decadent, and completely style over substance. In America, it's still a question of whether what you know or who you know gets you ahead. In England, that's not a question at all. It's who you know. Okay,
right.
That's it.
Right.
It's simply that and nothing more than that. So what Waugh is satirizing is a predicament that we're not completely in yet, but actually may be in 20 years. In other words, when our expert class grows so insulated, when our academics and our rich people grow so isolated from regular life and so contemptuous of the normal walk of life and the normal citizen, then we might have a situation like Waugh is describing. But he's describing the late stage of an empire that has gone on almost on inertia for so long that nobody really knows who to hire except that some noblewoman comes and hires them. When I was hired by Tina Brown at Vanity Fair, my first job in publishing, I remember that she asked me if I knew a woman named Daphne Guinness. And that was the interview, because I said yes. And I got the job. I mean, that's how it works. It was a scene out of Waugh. And now people might say that Waugh was a conservative because he was Roman Catholic, right? He was I believe, he was a very conservative character himself who moved among the upper classes. And though he makes ravaging, savage fun of them, seemed to respect.
Oh, he identifies with them completely.
Seemed to respect the way things were, sort of like Kingsley Amis, the other, the next great British satirist after Waugh, all of them in the shadow, I think, of P.G. Wodehouse, but
right, yeah, and Wilde before that, right?
But you can't satirize your society as Mark Twain pointed out in a long essay about Frenchmen coming to America and thinking they can analyze what goes on here, you can't satirize your society unless you're absolutely steeped in it. And that's the paradox of satire. You know, Joseph Heller, actually, we never said this during the Catch-22 phase, but he gave an interview in which he said, all my officers in World War II were great. I loved them all. I respected them all. My book was actually a transposed satire of corporate life in the 1950s and the way the Korean War has been prosecuted, put onto a World War II setting. And so even Heller, in a way, had as much affection and knowledge of as he did disdain for the institution that he satirized, because apparently he said he had a good war.
That's really interesting. I didn't know that. I would have thought something very different, but I guess it makes sense, right? I mean, you would have to have some knowledge of how the officers operated in order to write that book. Right. But a couple other things about Scoop. There are a couple of lines in here that are worth mentioning. There's a scene where Lord Copper talks about what the Daily Beast stands for. Lord Copper explained Nazism, fascism, and communism. Later, in his ghastly library, he outlined the situation in the Far East. Quote, the Beast stands for strong, mutually antagonistic governments everywhere, he said. Self-sufficiently at home, self-assertion abroad. So this is a very true observation about journalism. Like, as long as people are fighting somewhere, we're all for it. And, you know, as long as we have something to cover, cool.
Which goes back to the beginning of the broadcast. See, Matt, I'm criticized because I take seriously the literary models for reality. And if you believe, as Waugh did, that people often make up stories in order to cover them, and, you know, the facts are fungible, and, you know, newspapers are often putting their worst, how can I put it? At the Times, have you ever noticed, even the New York Times, that like a literary critic will then become the chief columnist, or some, you know, a travel writer will, you know, suddenly be a political writer or whatever. You know, he's so right in his refusal to be solemn about newspapers that I too refuse to be solemn about the press, and I also refuse to be solemn about politicians. They are two classes that, when put together, are not only not to be trusted, but are to be, you know, fundamentally, routinely, programmatically
rejected.
Rejected. And so if I have a harder time than most people taking literally the passing scene, it's because even though I haven't read Scoop itself, I know that it's telling the truth.
Yeah. And a fiction writer is allowed to get a little bit closer, I think, sometimes than the journalist is. But especially the arrangement that we have, where which is now very similar to what it was like in 1930s Britain, where most of the reporters are upper class, but kind of slobs from the upper class. And
Taylor Lorenz.
Yeah, exactly. Here's another scene where one of the people from the paper is talking about one of the competitors to the Daily Beast. Not really. He's always like that to waiters. You see, he's a communist. Most of the staff of the Twopence are. They're university men, you see. Pappenhacker says every time you are polite to a proletarian, you are helping to bolster up the capitalist system. He's very clever, of course, but he gets rather unpopular. And obviously, this is the era of what Kim Philby and all the Oxonians and men from Cambridge who got in trouble for the left-wing leanings. It was probably true that almost everybody who came out of the university back in those days was some form of socialist or communist or something like that.
And you know, Matt, so we've already, in our short novel discussion, history done a book by Graham Greene and a book by George Orwell. And now we're doing a book by Evelyn Waugh. Okay, 3 out of 4. We had one American. Now,
sorry about that, folks. Yeah.
What do George Orwell, Graham Greene, and Evelyn Waugh have in common?
You're all reporters.
They all knew each other.
Oh, that's true.
I'm reading a book right now about Graham Greene that my wife found in a used bookstore that is an investigative look at his life. A lot of his life was spooky. He worked for MI6. He was a spy. He also was a very high-earning popular novelist and screenwriter who got involved in some really dodgy tax avoidance schemes. But at any point, yes. But at any rate, I learned some things that I wish I'd known when we were discussing Orwell. When the war broke out and the Blitz started in London, 1940 would it be? The Ministry of Information, which was the British propaganda service, employed Orwell. And the Ministry of Truth in 1984 is actually a dark satirical version of the Ministry of Information where Orwell worked. Graham Greene also worked there. And there was also a kind of conservative stick in the mud named Malcolm Muggeridge, who
is that Ian? What's Ian Fleming? Is it? Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No. And Philby was around, and other characters. So this was a very small set of university-educated, witty writers who were put in charge of the propaganda services of, the Crown's government under attack by the Nazis. And they all had relatives who kind of made it complex for them, like, oh, my sister's a communist, or my uncle's a fascist. Because remember, at the beginning of World War II, there were still a lot of British who were fascists or had fascist sympathies or communist sympathies. And out of these people came decades of spy scandals, novels, James Bond, dystopian classics like 1984. This was a very small group, in other words.
It's kind of amazing that that little set produced all of this, right?
It's like the Algonquin Round Table in New York, the 1930s wits around the New Yorker magazine, except that they had like real power and real adventurous jobs and huge talent, and we've somehow gotten stuck in this slough without even meaning to. But these people all knew each other and were rough contemporaries and had the same kinds of educations. And you're right, tended, except for Waugh and others, tended to be on the left because that's where things were at right then.
I mean, I think we talked about this, but Greene even, I think, was a subordinate to Philby at one point in the MI6 and spoke on his behalf.
They knew each other well. And Greene actually, and Greene was sent to Africa and, wrote his book, The Heart of the Matter, and then The Human Factor later. So in other words, Waugh is satirizing a very small club. And that's the other thing to realize, that British society is a set of interlocking clubs, and membership in them, once achieved, kind of grants you immunity afterwards. Their deep state was about 10 people, who knew each other at college.
Yeah, and that probably warped their view of how easy it was to manipulate people, because they were actually working in those desks, which is really interesting. But one other thing about Waugh, I always thought he was similar to writers he's similar to, I don't know, Twain, Saki, some others. Just the ability to toss off these absolutely gorgeous passages that are laugh out loud funny. This is one about what it looks like outside Lord Copper's office. The personal private secretaries padded through the antechambers and led them nearer and nearer to the presence. At last they came to massive double doors encased in New Zealand rosewood, which by their weight, polish, and depravity of design proclaimed unmistakably, "Nothing but us stands between you and Lord Copper." That's just like describing the doors to an office. Like, I mean, you have to have a very, very rich literary gift to go there. And I think he really does. That's one of the things that makes his book so fun, is that the dialogue always pops. It's very fast. His situations, he comes in and out of them like a playwright. But what he's setting up with the story, and what's so interesting about it, it's 1938. The conflict in Africa and what's now Ethiopia is going to be between the left and the right in the classic sense of the term, right? Like in the absolute, we're talking about Nazis versus communists.
Right.
And where they're sending, I mean, we talked about this before. This is classic satire, where, the fish out of water story. You're sending this ridiculous, not even very good sort of nature writer who thinks of London as a great jungle that he wants to avoid, right? He's determined not to stay there for a whole day even, and he's going to be sent into the middle of the most savage place in Africa, in the middle of the left-right battle, the armed conflict, and he's going to be the person describing this as the rest of the story plays out. And it's, given where we are now and our sort of cultural milieu, I guess is the way to describe it, where there's, interplay between left and right. We're throwing around words like fascist and socialist a lot. This reporting job that we're about to read is going to be incredibly funny, but the setup is just great already.
Well, this is back when politics actually was political. You know what I mean?
Right. Yes.
And now I sometimes I think like we're all just wings of Facebook and Google, and we pretend to have politics, but compared to these people, when you're talking about a working class full of miners and striking factory workers and a continent that is succumbing to revolution, from Russia to other places, and another form of politics, which is all about strength, racial purity, the merger of corporate and state power, and a kind of Roman, a Roman imperial mindset for the fascists. Now that was politics, and individuals caught in that conflict were caught in an actual deadly conflict, which is funny. Here in America, the worst thing that happened to you is what? You might get looked at askance, or, told to wear a mask, or told to take your mask off, or whatever the things that we call politics are. But there, you could get shot, you could get exiled, you could get, stuck in a war.
Actually, William's going to find out that all of his predecessors who covered this beat were eaten.
Yeah.
Every last one of them. While he's on the way, he finds that out. It was no joke, and that's certainly true for a lot of reporters still today in lots of places in the world.
Yes.
And that's another thing. I don't think he shies away. As we'll see, he doesn't shy away from that in the book. He doesn't make light of it. He does make light of it, but it's very real in the book. It's the indifference and stupidity of the business and how it deals with that, and its motives for sending human beings into the middle of that. That's what he's going to make so much fun of. These people, the foreign editor can't find Iceland in a map. The head of the the owner of the newspaper doesn't know anything at all about what this war is. mistakes one writer for another and only does things because some social connection tells him to. It's just a series of misunderstandings by people who just have too much money and don't have any incentive to pay attention. And look, I think that's very similar to what happened to the news business. We've both talked about network a lot, and that era of American journalism where it was these huge corporations that they just started to lose touch with what it was that they were actually doing. Like they knew that it was a business and they understood that side of it very well. But what happened way down there, I don't think they were. They needed the accident of Howard Beale going mad to realize what people are actually thinking. But this is going to be.
Businesses are of different sizes and therefore of different qualities. A newspaper empire in 1930s England, London, was of a certain size. But it wasn't anything like what Murdoch became. It wasn't anything like what NBC is. And if network makes fun of corporate news, because remember, what drives the plot in network is the infusion of a massive amount of Middle Eastern money into this failing network. Okay, but it was still a club back in the days of law, and the companies were smaller and they were more personal, and we just don't. We don't have that anymore in the United States. The closest is the New York Times still being a family enterprise.
I think I worked for the last privately owned
Rolling Stone.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. It was one guy with all his foibles, but his personality was in the paper. He's very much like
Lord Copper. Actually, it's pretty funny
in some ways. Yes. So this was a way more personal business. To make fun of corporate news like Network did is another step in the evolution of the press. But to write a satire of the press as it exists now, I don't know that we can even do it. These are worldwide mega conglomerates that don't even have roots in national politics to some extent. They're bigger than that.
Yeah, and it's funny, especially considering how many great writers have been journalists. There aren't that many novels about journalism, right? How many can you think of?
In America or in
anywhere?
There are a few. There are some great ones. And I'd have to think. For some reason, my mind is stunned by the question. There are quite a few. They haven't had the kind of fame that you might expect because it's thought to be a niche world and so on.
Right.
But I'll come back to you on that. The important thing to remember, though, in terms of getting your head into WA, is that this sang-froid, this coldness about the world, also, like we just said, reflects a time of incredible conflict. World War II. This is a book written in 1938, which is a satire of an African country and, its foreign correspondent and its, revolutionary activity. But a real world war that killed tens and tens and tens of millions is on the horizon. So their ability to stay funny in the mouth of world conflict is something that I don't think we have in America. You know what I mean? There's no real equivalent.
It's true. And in the setup, and this is sort of the last thing I'll say is Wall was very much I think a craftsman in the way that he wrote. Everything is in pairs in this book. There's there are the city people who can't stand the country. They're completely ignorant. Like all the people who work at the newspaper, all they know about this William Booth is maybe we should feed him cider because that's what people in the country drink, and then Booth himself doesn't know anything about the city. So this city country, then there's going to be left and right, and there's going to be rich and poor, and there's going to be the brute and the beast, and but the plot is set up in this kind of beautiful mathematical way. It's kind of a little bit like what's the Oscar Wilde play, The Importance of Being Earnest, where it's matching character sets, moving through the country and through the city, parallel plot development, all that stuff. It's very skillfully done.
And in that sense, it's the opposite of Joseph Heller. Heller was willing to throw together, the shaggiest structure ever, full of routines and skits and dialogues and bits. And he kind of had them revolve around a central trauma a little bit, but he like I said, it was like a bomb dropped on a conventional novel. Waugh, however, he is like one of those rosewood doors that he described,
exactly,
leading to Lord Copper's office. There is not a single design in this book that isn't symmetrical in some way. There is not a joke that isn't paid off several times. There is not a sentence that doesn't turn right at the end like the crack of a whip at the period and drive its point home. Why it suffers from, you might say, an excess of perfect and balanced shapes and sentences and paragraphs and incidents. You will never be left hanging by Evelyn Waugh.
No, and I
no
love
loose ends. No loose ends.
The anarchic form of Catch-22. I think it's perfect, as you say. It's like a bomb going off. It completely fits the subject matter. But as we'll see, this also fits this subject matter. It's his prose is designed to be sharp and to slice through things, and he goes into this. He's about to go into this horrible situation where he's surrounded by all kinds of ridiculous characters, and he's going to carve them all up on all sides, and it's going to be great fun. In addition to being, have some depth of observation to it as well. So, but the setup is really beautiful, and hopefully everybody can pick up the book. And we'll talk about it more later this week. Any last thoughts, Walter?
Well, only this. Why we should be so critical of the Anglo-American relationship, as we have been in this podcast for years, really. We're always talking about the Brits getting too big for their britches and telling Americans what to do, and we're always skeptical of our government deferring to the Anglo-Atlantic ideal and so on. But we're also in love with their language and with
of course,
the writers, and with the cultural jokes and ironies that have come out of this relationship. So count us as deeply ambivalent about Anglo-American relations, but deeply pro the literature that has come out of them.
Of course. I mean, I don't know if you ever see that Saturday Night Live skit where Jeremy Irons is at a bar and he's got two American women, one on either side, and they both want to go home with him, but they keep asking him to say something in his British accent. And because he sounds so perfect when he speaks, that I think that's in every American. We're all deeply kind of on some level, we admire that sort of Oxonian lilt or Cambridge diction that comes from with somebody like, I don't know, Hugh Laurie or Stephen Fry or even Douglas Murray, right? Who's kind of the most famous exponent of that right now.
Hitchens. Why was the most prestigious American pundit for a while A Brit.
A Brit. Yeah, exactly. And they're very. I think they have a very well-deserved reputation for being incredible comics, right? I mean, from Monty Python all the way back to Swift and Fielding and all these. I mean, they've always been good at this form. They don't hold back at all. And this I think was the heyday of the British satirist, right? And it's just before World War II, and it there's a big promise at the beginning of this book. Like, we're going to get into some shit here, and you're going to love it, and you will. So
yeah.
So anyway, I hope everybody picks up the book. Walter, thanks for hanging out. And I'm going to go, me and my champion intestine, I'm going to go lie down for a little bit. And
have you eaten anything since getting the Clean Intestine Award?
I have. I already had a patty melt, so it's not so clean anymore.
So
but,
the first thing you despoiled your system with was a patty melt. You went, man, I have a margin for error. I'm going.
That's exactly what I thought.
I would have done the same thing. Yeah.
Oh man! All right, thanks everybody. We will see you again later this week.
Okay.